I don't believe trade is the main driver of that, but I'll grant that it does happen sometimes.
Who cares about bringing money? Okay, the whole idea of running like a business.
I don't really think it's something that you should take. I don't know.
The argument against charging people rent?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, typically philosophical arguments against
That's a legitimate criticism. Because, I mean, you look at why USA was even invented.
So, I don't know. Like, I think a recurring theme or a recurring trend is that
less and less government. I want personal responsibility. I want personal accountability.
say that I'm like left of liberal. I don't identify as like a communist or socialist or any of this stuff. Probably like a why would that be revelatory to know that water boils down?
About people who are diplomats or ambassadors from other.
Did I say that? Did I say that it was theoretically possible to include like it increase?
Natural society is a society where it's survival of.
You can. What you're describing, you can't do. It's, first of all, not what I'm talking about. Second of all, you can't.
So basically, like, even your Lord and Savior Donald Trump didn't do the best job.
That nature, you refer to it as being conscious, or the conscious community.
So I think that gay marriage at the University at the Supreme Court level actually.
No, but my man just is in the building.
And I find it very interesting that fellow believers are.
Well, there are examples, but these are minor examples compared to the ones that I'm giving. I'm talking about two. It's unconstitutional, they shouldn't do it. But now they're arguing about, well, if they do it.
This video with a little blonde hair. Yeah, that's what your mom said last night too.
Let's ignore USAID. That's obviously upsetting you, and I get that because
no, it's not upsetting me.
There's a reason I'm successful. There's a reason why I'm liked.
This is exactly why Democrats.
And good evening. Hello. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Throwdown Thursday. I have none other than the one and only Ryan C. Mullally here in the flesh. Well, cyber flesh, I guess. Straight from Word War Debate. He just took his big victory lap over there. He recently debated Pisco on this topic of the Supreme Court should limit birthright citizenship. If you watched Word War Debate and you sat there and you said, oh no, Ryan, that's wrong. It's this, it's that, it's yada, yada, yada. Well, I've got a show for you and I've got a panel you get to hop on and vocalize all of your, I don't know, lib-tier concepts and talking points and whatever you'd like to say. But here is Ryan. Ryan, lay it on us thick. Tell us why they should limit the birthright citizenship.
Well, thanks for the glowing introduction. And yeah, it was really fun to go down in Atlantic City to debate on the big stage, to debate with Pisco, which is always a pleasure. My frenemy, my buddy. Yeah, it was great to win in the first debate at Word War Debate. So this is a topic that I think everyone should start talking about because it's going to be real very soon. On January 20th, the Trump administration submitted their brief to the Supreme Court on this exact topic. It's going to be fully briefed. It's going to be argued this year. It's going to be decided this year. So birthright citizenship could change this year. And I think it should. And I think the Supreme Court should change it. And I hope that even if you disagree with me, after you hear what I have to say, you'll understand why the Supreme Court should change this, and it won't catch you off guard the way people were caught off guard when Roe v. Wade got overturned. Because I'm telling you, this is coming. This is going to happen this year. So the topic has like a legal and a moral aspect to it. When I say we should limit birthright citizenship, like morally, what am I talking about? Well, right now we have something called what I would call universal or near universal birthright citizenship. That means if you are born in the territory of the United States, with very few exceptions, you are a citizen. Flat stop. Doesn't matter if your parents were here illegally. Doesn't matter if your parents were here temporarily on vacation. Doesn't matter if your parents are going to take you back to another country and raise you in another country with totally different values. You are a U.S. citizen. You have a U.S. birth certificate. You can get a U.S. passport. You can vote in U.S. elections. You can own property in the U.S. You can go to college in the U.S. You have all the advantages that come with citizenship in the greatest country on earth. Now, this is a hideously outdated concept. Like, to the extent that it was ever a good idea, we inherited it from England. And England no longer does it. In fact, almost no Western country in Europe does it anymore. And the reason, and this is not the legal reason, this is the moral reason, is obvious. In the modern world, people can get across a border pretty easily. It's not like the 1800s when they had to take a steamship for several months and travel the Atlantic, right? This is a much easier journey. They can show up and they can get citizenship for their children relatively easily at cost to us and advantage to them. So there's a quote that I like from Judge Posner, who's he's a really well-respected judge. And he explained that there are hundreds of thousands of women, especially in Asia, and there's businesses. And these women will pay and they will get a tourist visa and they will come to the US, sometimes to the mainland, but often to a territory like Puerto Rico where it's still the US, but there's less security and it's easier to get in, right? Well, there's other territories, I'm just naming one. They have a child there and they bring the child back to normally China, but there's other countries that do it. And then they get all these benefits for the child. And this has a few problems. One, it just lets people take advantage of us. Two, as Judge Posner pointed out, it makes a mockery of US citizenship. That we basically, like, the US is supposed to be a social compact. We're here and we buy into it. You're not supposed to let people into the compact who are cheating you and taking advantage of you on purpose. You're supposed to have to come in by agreement. And then third, it raises not insubstantial national security issues. Like we're going to come to a point where there's going to be people in some number, we don't know exactly how large, but a volume of people who are Chinese citizens or have allegiance to China, allegiance to Russia, who can vote in our elections, who can get jobs in sensitive industries within the United States. They have the full rights as citizenship, just like anybody else. And if it occurred to me, this occurred to the FSB, to the KGB.
Right.
This is if it occurred to me in 5 minutes, it occurred to them decades ago.
Way sooner.
Yeah. So there is a serious issue here. And if you go back, you watch the debate I had with Pisco. Pisco didn't even challenge this because the moral issue is so obvious. He went right to the legal issue, which is fine. I think the legal issue is stickier, and that's what people talk about that. But morally, there's a big problem. And then, so the question is legally, what is required of us? Because look, if the Constitution requires universal birthright citizenship, then it's not up to us, right? The Constitution has requirements. If the Constitution says something must be done, we don't get to vote on it. The president doesn't get to change it, right? That's the law. But it doesn't really say that. And that's the rub. And I think that's what we're going to spend most of our time getting into tonight. What the 14th Amendment says is instead that if you're born here and subject to the jurisdiction thereof, you are a citizen. And what all the lawyers are going to the Supreme Court to the debate is, what does that phrase, subject to the jurisdiction thereof, mean? If it means, as Pisco thought, and as people on the left tend to think, that you're subject to the laws at all. If you're here, you could be sued, you could be put in jail, you're subject to jurisdiction in the loosest sense. We call that territorial jurisdiction. Then, yeah, the Constitution requires universal birthright citizenship. But if it means something else, if it means complete jurisdiction, if it means that you have to have political allegiance to the United States, then we can limit universal birthright citizenship, and we can limit it in specific ways. And the Trump administration has tried to limit it in two specific ways. By executive order, President Trump has tried to limit it so that if the father is not a citizen and doesn't have status, and the mother is here temporarily or illegally, then the child does not get birthright citizenship. And those are the limitations President Trump is looking for. Candidly, I don't think he's going to get everything he wants. I think he's going to get a fraction of what he wants, but I think he will get some of it. And the Supreme Court will limit birthright citizenship as a result. And I'm sure we're going to get into the weeds on why that is, but that's kind of the frame of what this issue is. The moral issue, we're being taken advantage of, our citizenship is being cheapened, and then the legal issue, how to best interpret the 14th Amendment.
Okay. I wrote a lot of notes down because I knew you were going to go into a lot of different directions. I do want to start with why this year? Why now? This is just being brought up. Why? Is it just because of Trump? Did he put this in place? Or even why did he put this in place? Why this year?
Yeah, it's happening now because of Trump's executive order in January 2025. But this isn't the first time. In 1993, God, I'm blanking on the senator's name. I think it was Harry Reid, tried to limit birthright citizenship, and it didn't get through the Senate. But President Trump is trying again in 2025, and he's doing basically the same thing that Harry Reid did in 93, which is that he's noticing the problem that U.S. citizenship is being cheapened, that it is creating a reward for illegal immigration. Like,
Yes.
can you imagine, like, if you're pregnant, avoiding border security and trying to sneak across the border is like a risky and dangerous thing to do, but we're incentivizing it because we reward you with citizenship for your kid. And if you're richer, you can pay for it. You can pay for these services that bring you over. So it creates a very bad incentive on the immigration front. And it creates a moral hazard with our citizenship. It creates national security concerns. So he passed the executive order in January 2025, and it's been working its way up the court system. So now we've finally gotten to the point where they're briefing it. So the way that goes is President Trump put his brief in on the 20th. The other side's going to put their brief in the next couple weeks. Then there'll be one more brief from the president's team. Bunch of other people who called amici will join in and say what they have to say. They'll schedule oral argument, and then sometime probably in the spring, summer, fall, they'll rule on this. So, this year we'll probably know whether or not birthright citizenship is going to be changed.
Okay. All right. That settles that answer. You mentioned Roe v. Wade, and I think this is a very important piece to add in because Roe v. Wade got overturned, and it was kind of like a shock and awe to everyone that this even happened. But there are a lot of technicalities as to why that happened. Can you kind of wind that in with the technicalities of the birthright citizenship and why the technicalities on Roe v. Wade were so important?
Yeah, so when Roe v. Wade got overturned, I think a lot of lay people were really surprised. They were angry. They were surprised and they were angry. And I understand it because if you're not in the weeds on the law, it can kind of feel like the Supreme Court's doing something and you don't understand why, so it must be unfair. But I think in the legal community, we've been seeing the breadcrumbs for a long time. Roe v. Wade was a vulnerable decision. It was ruled on on substantive due process grounds that the Supreme Court's very hostile to, that it was not even Justice Ginsburg thought it wasn't a particularly good decision and that it was going to be a problem down the road. And she was right. So all the warning signs were there. And for birthright citizenship, I think it's been taken for granted for at least 80 years. It's not that there's a case that necessarily says we must do universal birthright citizenship. There's one case called Wong Kim Ark, but I don't think it says that. And we'll probably talk about the case, but it doesn't quite say what people think it says. So I don't think they have to overturn any cases. But here, what's going to catch people off guard is that for 80 years, we've just been doing this. And I think that when it changes, people are going to be surprised by it. And as I've talked more and more about this issue, I've been surprised by how emotionally invested people are in it. Like I've had to say to some people like, well, why are you so worried about this? And part of the reason why is that they think it goes backwards. Like it's going to take away citizenship from people who already have it, but that's not even on the table.
President Trump's order and you can't do that anyway. You never call somebody a criminal after you make the law later, after they've already done something. Like that. Yeah. That's always been is standing in place.
Yeah, taking away a right that somebody already has is very different than saying we're going to change it in the future. Right? There's a reliance. It's different. So I think some people are worried about it because of that, and that's just not before the court. It's not an issue. So I think that's one reason. And then the other reason is it's just been the status quo for so long. And people think it couldn't possibly change as a result. But I think it probably will. I think it will be limited. And for the record, I thought going into this, when I started researching it, I was like 80% sure Trump loses. And now I'm like 80% sure he's going to win at least on something. So I think that there's a history here that people aren't aware of. And as you dig into the details, it makes more and more sense. But if you don't dig into the details, then of course the status quo seems like it's going to last forever.
Right. No, that makes sense. Now you brought up legal versus moral. At first you said legal and moral, but then later you kind of added in it's kind of a legal issue versus a moral issue. Give me kind of why the versus. Why are we kind of like, why would the legality be at the whims, at the morality behind it? Because I would always think that morality feeds into the legal system. So give me some elaboration there.
One of the big misconceptions that people have about constitutional rights is that they are here, that they're universally good things and that they protect us and that they're wonderful. They are, and they can be, and they do that. But that's actually not their function. Their function is to create rigidity, right? So when you have a right, what does that really mean? Like you have the right to free speech. Well, it means that if somebody wants to ban you for having offensive speech and they want to pass a law that says Sarah can no longer talk on the internet law, they're not going to be allowed to. Yeah. Because the Constitution took it out of the democratic process, right? It's we can't vote on it. Our leaders can't decide on it. It's not ours to decide. So that when the law and morality can be in tension, because if you've taken something out of the democratic process, and then later people are like, wait a minute, this is a bad idea. This seems like it's causing problems. This might be immoral. This seems like it's a problem, but you're no longer allowed to vote on it. Well, that's tough titty, right? Like now you got to amend the Constitution.
Right.
So that's where things get hard. Like when people start saying like, when people you see this a lot in the Second Amendment, when people say like, well, wouldn't it make more sense to ban handguns? And you're like, might make more sense. Doesn't really matter that much if it does, because the Second Amendment says what it says, right? So like you can talk policy all day, it's not going to change anything. So if the 14th Amendment says we must have universal birthright citizenship, then the moral argument doesn't really matter that much. But if it doesn't, then the moral argument matters a great deal, because then it's up to our leaders. Like put it this way, if the Supreme Court limits birthright citizenship, they're not saying it will never come back. They're saying the Constitution doesn't require it. President Trump might take it away. The next president might give it again. And the next Congress might take it away, right? It's up to us politically. Right now, the status quo is it's not up to us.
Because it's just written, the way it's written. Yeah. Like the technicality of how it's written says, look, if you're born here on this territory, you're one of us. It's good.
Yeah, that's the assumption. I don't think that's what it says, but that's the assumption.
Right. Okay. So when morality comes into place, though, like what does that become subject to? I mean, who's deciding the morality factors behind it, or who's throwing all of those into the bag?
Well, I think what you'll see, like if you read the Supreme Court briefs, is that people are they're really sophisticated and they're writing different things for different justices, right? Like when you write about the morality issues, Justice Thomas and Justice Alito are already on board for limiting birthrights. They don't need to be convinced. They're already happy to do this. So when you feed the policy stuff in, you're giving them details for what they want to write, because they already know what they think it is legally. Then somebody like Justice Barrett, who I think is more on the fence, she's not going to care about the policy. What she's going to care about is, because she's a very, very principled originalist, and she's also my favorite justice, but she's going to care about the specific history. Like, what did the people at the time this document was written understand it to mean? What did America understand it to mean? And she's going to want a really specific historical analysis. And that's what's going to move the needle for her. So when you see this, and then politically, you got to sell it to the public. And the public doesn't give a shit about the legal arguments. They only care about the moral arguments. So you got, so like you're pitching your facts and your arguments to different audiences. And that's why it gets discussed in different ways.
Okay, that makes sense. I get that. For the universal birthright citizenship, you mentioned born in a specific territory, right? So I would like for everyone to understand, because I know I've had to have this explained to me, kind of the layman's terms behind what that means, and then also with the exceptions and what they mean to it, like the technicalities behind what that means, to be able to be granted that.
So this is not my position, but to give you the status quo of like how it's been interpreted by the majority of people for the last 80 years or so. The 14th Amendment, in the operative language, is that you get birthright citizenship if you are born and subject to the jurisdiction thereof of the United States, right? So born means born within the territory of the United States. That includes the 50 United States. It also includes our unincorporated territory, Puerto Rico, Guam, places like this that aren't states, but if you're born there, you're still a citizen. So places like that. And then if you are a universal birthright citizenship advocate, which is, I'm now making the other side's argument, but just to explain what it is, they say subject to the jurisdiction thereof means subject to the jurisdiction at all. You're in the territory. So what does that mean? It means that we can exercise our legal power over you. We can put you in jail. We can subject you to our laws. We can make you pay taxes. So who are the exceptions to that? They're very few. It's people like ambassadors who, you can't charge with crimes in the US because they're not actually, like, there's a deal where they can't charge our ambassadors and we don't charge theirs. That's the exception today. A long time ago, there was an exception for Indians. I'm going to say Indians, not Native Americans, by the way. Please don't clutch your pearls too hard. The language of all the documents that we're going to talk about says Indians, and if I have to switch, it's going to get wildly confusing. So
fair enough.
But like they didn't used to get birthright citizenship, and then that changed, but that used to be an exception. And there's an exception for like if a military invaded us and they had kids on the camp, like if Canada conquered Maine and the Mounties had some kids while they occupied Maine, they wouldn't get birthright citizenship either. But the reason I call it universal birthright citizenship is, as you can tell, these exceptions basically don't exist. Like the Indian one is no longer good law. The ambassador one is like 5-10 people, if they have their wives with them, maybe. And nobody's invaded us in a long time. So this is not like, these exceptions don't really matter. So under the current state of play, if you're born here, you're a citizen pretty much universally.
Right. Okay. That makes sense. And you mentioned the advantages of what if a child were to be born here in the United States, whether they stay here or their parents are just kind of like driving through, stop at a hospital, have baby, great, you're an American citizen, but then they go back to their own country where they hailed from. You mentioned all of these advantages. Is there a longer list? Because I know you mentioned they could go to college here. They can get a passport here. What else do they have over top of anyone else?
They can go to college here. They can go to public education here if they want to. They can get a passport. They can opt into all of our systems in terms of like benefits and all these sorts of things. They can vote, which is a pretty big benefit of citizenship. They could run for office if they wanted to. So you could have somebody who was born and raised in another country with completely different values who comes over here and runs for office, and if they can get elected, good for them. Like they have all the same rights and privileges that any US citizen would have. The problem is there's no real reason to think they have the same political allegiances a US citizen would have. And that opens the door to all sorts of mischief. Now, does that mean that like everybody's doing these bad things? No, obviously not, right? It just means that we have kind of this loophole. And then because there's a loophole, people will take advantage of the loophole. And the question is, can we close it?
So I could be born here and, week 2 of my life, go back to a random country, turn 18, and then I could like get online and sign up to vote.
Yeah.
And I could vote from a different country, like with a mail-in ballot and everything.
Oh, I don't know if you could vote from a mail-in ballot. I'm not sure because you don't have a state Like because like for example, if you think of a presidential,
Oh,
like
yeah.
you'd have the same problem there that people in Puerto Rico have. It's like Puerto Ricans are citizens and they have the right to vote, but Puerto Rico doesn't have an electoral college vote and doesn't have a House seat or a Senate seat. So there's nothing to vote for,
I
right?
see.
So what they would need to do is come here, right?
Mhm.
But then if you are a citizen, if you have a passport and a birth certificate, and you can fly to the country, you don't need a visa. You're a
Mhm.
citizen. You can go to any state you want, and then you can vote there, right? So the barrier, there is a physical barrier to get voting privileges, but it still is available to you. Let's put it that way. And I think what you're seeing as, like, for example, these businesses start maturing in Asia, is you're seeing that there's an increasingly number of students who are coming over, having finished primary school abroad, and they want to use the U.S. University system because it's a really good university system. And then suddenly they're showing up, and they could move here a year ahead of time and then get reduced price tuition at a state school, because if you're a resident of the state, right? Like all these different things that just make you shake your head and go, wait, why is that? Not that, like, it's not even really...
Would they even qualify for like maybe they're a impoverished family or something? Would they even qualify for like grants and things to be able to go to our schools out here?
In theory, yeah. I mean, it depends on their situation. Like they wouldn't automatically get anything. And if you're a member of one of those families that was paying for the service, it's unlikely that you have financial need. But they would have, like, they're on a totally level playing field, right?
So,
with any other citizen.
What is the goal to doing that? If I were to do that for my child? What is my incentive? What is my end all be all goal to say, I'm going to make sure my child has dual citizenship so they can have an American passport and be an American citizen considered? What is my goal? Why?
There's a lot of different goals, like, I mean, if you want to go the really sinister route, you have, like, and this is, I'm not saying we have evidence of this. I'm saying it as a thought experiment. Let's say that you were Vladimir Putin and you were like, man, I really would like to get some US intel. Wouldn't it be great if I got a bunch of female KGB agents, we did a surrogacy program, and we just started flying them to Guam, and they gave birth in Guam, and they came back, and then we're going to raise these kids as FSB agents, and then 18 years from now, they're going to be Americans. Wouldn't that be wonderful, right? So, like, that's like the supervillain version,
right?
And then, like, on, like, the polar opposite side, you have people who are really poor, looking for better lives, and they say, well, even if US law says I can't cross the border and I don't have a visa and I'm not allowed in America, if I can just get there and give birth, my kid can't be turned away. Right. So, like that's like the extreme other end of it. And then in the middle, you have, like, these kind of like Asian families who are saying, like, well, God, I want the same way, I want every advantage for my kid. I want to send him to private school. I want him to be an American. I want him to go to American universities. If the Chinese government gets a little too oppressive and communist, they can go live in America now whenever they want. They can take advantage of all the American systems that exist. So, the motivations are very different for different people.
Okay, that's fair. Now, you said this came originally from an outdated law that even England has gotten rid of. Now, what was that original thing that England had going on?
Yeah, so England, we inherited a lot of our law from England because obviously the common, like, legal tradition. England, if you think back in the day, was a feudal monarchy. So in England, the question wasn't really birthright citizenship. And if you look at, like, the people who wrote about it, Blackstone is the historical author who most people cite when they talk about this period. He doesn't use the word birthright citizenship ever. He talks about birthright subjecthood, because the question was, if you were born, which lord did you owe your labor to? Like, who served? Yeah.
Totally different thing.
Yeah. The question was, whose serf were you? Like, who, So, and the answer was, wherever you were born, that was, you owed that divine king. If you were in France or you were in England, that's who you owed your labor to. And back then we call it expatriation in the legal community, but what it means is renouncing your citizenship and changing countries. There was no such thing. So your birthright subjecthood was forever. You could never stop being English and go become French legally. You could maybe like flee the country and illegally do it, but legally there was no right. So that was the tradition that we imported when we came over from England. And then, the universal birthright citizenship people will tell you that informed how we think of birthright citizenship, and that's where it came from. People on my side of the argument are going to say, if that was true, like that we could never stop being English, then what was the American Revolution all about? It was literally a war to stop being English. So it kind of seems silly to think that we would take that law, which wasn't even like a law that was written down. It was a common law. It was like just an understanding, and then import it into our thought process post-revolution. It seems more likely that what we would do is, maybe something informed by it, but something uniquely American, because we kind of rejected that specific view of the world when we mass expatriated from England.
We kind of left that behind. Why would we keep incorporating it?
Yeah, that's the idea.
So, but even England doesn't utilize that anymore. Obviously, it's servitude, right? Like that. That's not really like running in place. But why did they completely just stop using it altogether, or did they say, hey, we're not going to do this anymore?
Yeah,
they just kind of fizzle out.
They did it for a long time. I'm blanking, so I'm trying to look up the year where it ended, because I'm forgetting. I should remember this. This is a year I should remember. It's 1983. Yeah, they did birthright citizenship for quite a long time. And then because it was a common law thing, not a constitutional thing, you can change it with a law. So, because like the common law is just kind of like a legal tradition. If you pass a law, you can change the common law. So they changed it in 1983. And it's for all the same reason that we've been talking about. Like in the modern world, this is a very bad idea. It just doesn't really make a lot of sense. Because if you have this rule, it just incentivizes people to break your immigration controls and then prevents you from having a functional immigration policy. It creates a perverse incentive. And this is very common in Europe. Most European countries, at least like Northern European countries, had birthright citizenship. Rome had citizenship by blood, not by birth, not by place of birth. So there was kind of dueling traditions. But the countries in the North that had birthright citizenship have pretty much universally abandoned it at this point, because it just in the modern world with the ease of travel, it is not a good policy position. So they've all adopted something that looks kind of more like what we're talking about here today. Like you have to, no one's trying to get rid of birthright citizenship completely.
Right.
No one's saying like, if you're born here, and
like you want to close the loophole so that they can stop using the loophole.
Yeah. No, like no one is arguing that like, if you're a citizen and you have a kid, that your kid's not a citizzen. Like that's that's not up for grabs. Like nobody thinks that should change. I think the tough cases let's do the easier ones. The easy ones are like, you've been here illegally. You've been here for 2 weeks. You had a kid here. Do we owe you citizenship for your child? It's like, no, you weren't even supposed to be here. Like we should send you and your child home because that's the easy case. I think the hard case is something like, yeah, you were here illegally, but you've been here for 20 years. You've been a good member of the community. You haven't committed any new crimes. I think that's the case where Trump might not win, because that seems
because in that instance, though, that falls under like that subject to jurisdiction umbrella, right? That technicality. Whereas if you're just passing through, stay 2 weeks, have baby, go home, you're not subject to anything.
Yeah, and the history is really rich on the temporary point. Like there's quote after quote after quote. And if you watch the Word War debate, I was quoting them. I'm not being as aggressive in this conversation, so I'm not just trying to like read to you. But where the history is very clear that the senators, the legal commentators, everyone involved, nobody thought that if you were here temporarily, you got birthright citizenship. This was a very, I mean, you could find some stray quotes, I guess, but there's a lot of evidence to the contrary. Illegal's harder because there was no such like illegal immigrant in the way we use the term today didn't exist in 1868.
Right.
Like they didn't. There was no such thing as an illegal immigrant until like 30 years later when they started doing different immigration policy in certain parts of specifically with China, actually. So where that language comes from is more about political allegiance. And that's, I think, the correct test. So there's a story that I think is really interesting is keep in mind, the 14th Amendment was ratified in 1868. It was drafted in 1866. This is all after the Civil War, right? And when you talk about complete jurisdiction, you're asking like, who is ours? Who is American, right? Well, these same senators, these same men had to answer that question 3 years earlier in 1863 because there was a draft for the Civil War. And there were all these foreigners living in America. And there were Frenchmen and Englishmen. They're living in America, and then they get drafted, and all of a sudden they say, "Oh no! Turns out I'm not American. I've been here 15 years, but I'm not American, right?" And I don't want to fight, right? So, at that time, if you were here and you wanted to become American, you would sign something called a Declaration of Intent, which said, "I renounce my foreign sovereign's power over me, and I intend to become American." And that started the naturalization process. You weren't a citizen yet, but it was the start. And the Senate said, if you signed that document, we could draft you because you were sufficiently American, you owed us political allegiance. And I think that's more what the test should be. It's not necessarily whether if you've been here 20 years, it might not be that whether you crossed illegally might not be the only question. I think the question might be like, are you really sufficiently ours? Have you renounced your foreign country's hold over you and you are trying to be American? And the court's going to play with that. I'm not 100% sure what they'll decide, but I think that's a much harder question and a much more technical question than the temporary one, which I think is actually relatively easy. It's like, you've been here 3 minutes, right?
Right.
And there's a lot of examples to the contrary. Like, I mean, I was saying, like Judge Barrett and the justices are looking at the history. There's an interesting example where shortly after the amendment was ratified, just to show what people thought at the time, a woman named Mary Devereux, who was an Irish woman, God bless the Irish, like me, she was in a boat and she was trying to get access to New York, and she was pregnant. And she was asking whether she could get entrance to the country. Eventually, the government said no. But before they said no, she gave birth. And when she gave birth, they weren't like monsters. So they took her off the boat. They brought her to a hospital in New York. She gave birth. So then afterwards, the question was posed to the Attorney General of the United States. Well, is her kid a citizen? Because the child gave birth in New York. She gave birth in New York. And the Attorney General said, no, she's here temporarily. Her kid's not a citizen. They sent them back to Ireland. Right. And there's countless examples like this. And these examples aren't like court rulings, but what they show is that at the time, people didn't think that if you were here temporarily, you got birthright citizenship. If they did, that kid was a citizen and you can't send them back to Ireland. But they didn't think that. They, in fact, thought the opposite. So I think that point's easier. I think the illegal point's going to be harder for the Trump team, but we'll see.
Okay, that makes sense. Then you had national security issues. Now, you kind of gave the example of Putin going and starting a baby army with KGB and surrogacy of mothers. What other national security issues could you potentially run into? I mean, we have supervillain crazy, but what else is there out there that we should be concerned about?
Yeah, I mean, you can take this to the extreme and to the and then bring it back to like the very, very plausible, and then to the things that we know are already happening. Like if you have universal birthright citizenship, this is going to incentivize people to attempt to circumvent our border controls. And it's going to attempt to circumvent people who are pregnant to circumvent our border controls, which is very dangerous for them and also just not good for border agents, not good for people who live on the border, you know, like the coyotes, the whole industry around trafficking people into the country illegally is very dangerous, is linked to the cartels. There's a lot of money that flows into it that is linked to drug trafficking. Basically, it creates a black market, and that black market does nothing good for us. So that's like kind of the baseline of what we like know for sure is already happening. I think like another, if we're going to go on like the other end and start talking about like national security concerns that are like, I mean, they're hypothetical, but if I thought of them, you know, this, you know, people were having these discussions, right? Like, well, it's very hard to change an election's results. Like when you think about like the presidency, but we also know it's very easy to change the results in a very small area. Like when President Trump famously got caught on tape asking for 11,000 votes in Georgia, because 11,000 votes actually made a difference in that, like, you know, but even on a micro level, like let's say you're trying to elect a mayor, you're trying to elect a city councilman, you're trying to win a much smaller scale election in a place that matters for some reason. Maybe a place that has zoning rules, or maybe there's rules that are restrictive about who can invest, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
Well, if you suddenly imported voters en masse, you know, interesting. Or to play it out in something that we're seeing happening more recently, if you look at Minnesota politics, increasingly Minnesota politics are decided by Somali tribal politics. So you see you see American politicians who are trying to curry favor with subgroups of various Somali factions because the voting power of the Somalis within Minnesota is so high. So, you know, another risk is that you get insular groups who don't really have broader American interests and aren't really interested in assimilating, but will band together and start voting in a block.
Right.
And now, because they're voting in a block, you have to honor their interests. And we do see this pop up. The Somali example is very famous, but this is also in New York. You see this a lot with like the Hasidic Jewish community, where like they vote in a block, and they often get a large amount of, like in New York City, there's always a fight because they get resources for their own schools, their own busing, their own, like it's totally separate from the rest of the population. And it's because it's an insular voting block. Now, if US citizens want to form an insular voting block, there's nothing you can do to stop them, right? But we're asking the question of who should get to do that, right? So that if we don't have to let Chinese nationals form voting blocks and then start influencing our politics, that's probably a thing we might want to avoid. And then, you know, the flip side of that on the far side is just like, you know, if you're a citizen, you can get jobs in the tech sector, you can get jobs in the government, you can get jobs, you know, now
like you could go into NSA, like things that this is actually top secret clearance kind of stuff, and that's actually a scary thought to think that somebody could be. But then that's a long time commitment to create a child. And then you got to hope that they're smart enough. And then you got to hope that they're, you know, gonna like listen to everything you tell them to do. And then send them off and hope that they're going to follow through. That's a really big investment.
It's a big investment, but here's the scary thing. Remember that quote? I read it. I paraphrased it. I'll just read it now just to make sure that I can land the plane on it. This is the quote from Judge Posner. There's a huge and growing industry in Asia that arranges tourist visas for pregnant women so they can fly to the United States and give birth to an American. Obviously, this was not the intent of the 14th Amendment. It makes a mockery of citizenship. This was Judge Posner of the Seventh Circuit of our U.S. court system. And he wrote that in 2003. So when he wrote that and he was concerned about that, all those kids are old enough to vote. all those kids are old enough to have jobs. So it can sound a little bit like, oh my God, that's a long-term investment. But this is already happening, right? Like we're talking about it now because there's a Supreme Court case, but this isn't a new story. This is an old story. This has been something that, like, if countries or businesses or individuals were interested in exploiting this, they've been exploiting it for decades, not minutes. They're not starting now. The program started 40 years ago, right? So
oh my God.
So that's the way that,
Like, oh, I'm gonna just like think everybody is a spy.
Yeah, and look, we have way, like, if you like, here's the nice thing, like, if you're a Chinese citizen and you come over here and you try to get into the government and then you're reporting to China, you're going to get charged with a crime, right? Like, that's illegal. Like, there are mechanisms for policing this, right? It's not like you can just give our secret information to China scot-free because you're a citizen, right? Like, we're not completely helpless, but like, it's weird that we incentivize it, as I guess the thing. Like, it's kind of like, with when people were complaining about the border policy under Biden, the question isn't like whether it's illegal to open the border the way the border is open. The question is like, why are you doing it? Like, like on some level, like it just seems like a bad idea. So if we are allowed to change the policy, then we should. Right. And that's where you get into the legal stuff about whether you're allowed to change the policy or not.
Oh my goodness. All right. What I'm going to do, I'll go ahead and actually, I'm going to drop the link in the chat for anyone who wants to start piling backstage. You guys can take some time getting back there. We'll open up in about 15 minutes, but I want to give you the time to talk about, I'm going to butcher the name, I think, but Won Kim Ark, that case.
Yeah.
Did I say it right?
Won Kim Ark.
Won Kim Ark.
Yeah, it's so this is going to be a little bit technical, but Won Kim Ark is the case that the universal birthright citizenship crowd says establishes that we have universal birthright citizenship. This was the case where the Supreme Court granted birthright citizenship to the child of Chinese citizens who were not American citizens. And therefore, established the modern tradition, right? There's two ways of reading this case. The universal birthright citizenship crowd will say we talked about English common law. They relied on that English tradition. They said that informed the 14th Amendment. And if you follow that logic, then of course it's universal because in England it was universal. And that's kind of their argument. The counter argument is if you look at the language of the case, it's long, they say a lot of stuff, but at the end, the court said we're resolving a single question. And the single question was, Won Kim Ark was the child of Chinese immigrants who were here permanently and legally. Does he get citizenship? And the answer was yes. But of course, President Trump's order would also have granted Won Kim Ark citizenship, right? Because he was here permanently and legally. So, when President Trump's lawyers drafted that executive order, they drafted it to avoid asking the Supreme Court to overturn Won Kim Ark. What he's really asking the Supreme Court to do is say Won Kim Ark is still good law, but we're limiting it to what it strictly held. Just that like one paragraph. This whole thing about English common law and their reasoning, we're not incorporating all of that. We're just taking the single question the court answered. We're not overturning it. That's good law. And that's the response there. So the question for the lawyers is, should that case be read broadly or narrowly? And that kind of thing.
Why did that even get brought up? Why, like, what's the history or background for why he was even brought to question on this? Oh,
so this is like most constitutional law, it's a story of the history of American racism is the answer. But that's most of American constitutional law. But basically in the late 1800s, we had a treaty with China that said that no Chinese citizen could ever naturalize. So no matter what they did, they could never become U.S. citizens. And then we passed laws called the Chinese Exclusion Acts. And the Chinese Exclusion Acts,
God, this does sound racist.
yeah,
Jesus.
dramatically, yeah, yeah. I'm just telling you what happened. It dramatically limited the amount of Chinese people that could come to the country. So if you were a laborer, skilled, unskilled, you were not allowed into the country. But if you were a merchant, if you did business, you were allowed in. His parents were merchants. So they were selling and importing and reselling things, right? That sort of thing. So they were here legally because they were merchants. Now, as you can imagine, as these Chinese exclusion laws get passed, I think their reaction was the same as your reaction. Like, yikes, it's getting a little rough over here. This might not be a great time to be Chinese in America. So they took their child and they went back to China.
Okay.
Right? And then he tried to re-enter, but he is not a merchant. He's a laborer. So when he tries to re-enter, America says, no, you're Chinese and you're a laborer. You are excluded. You cannot enter the country. And he said, no, I'm American. I'm not Chinese. Right? And so then they had to decide, did he get birthright citizenship? So that's the case. And, you could see how, the universal birthright citizenship folks are going to rely on this common law tradition that informed the court's reasoning. But on the flip side, you could ask kind of like the very simple question, like, who was this person and what did the court decide about him? And the answer is his parents were here legally. His parents were here for years and years and years permanently. And they had a child here under Trump's executive order. Under Wong Kim Ark, he'd be a citizen, and no one's trying to change that outcome.
So you could even utilize that case to your advantage in a sense, because they were legally here. They were here for a lot of years. So that would actually push Trump's prerogative in terms of his limitations that he is requesting, when the other side thinks that it works against it. I'm not understanding how they think it works against it.
Yeah, let me do the devil's advocate argument.
Okay.
If you read, so I'm going to put on my other hat. I'm going to argue for the other team. If you read the case, they spend a lot of time talking about the common law of England. And they say, clearly we must have taken this common law tradition of birthright citizenship. And that's what the people must have meant when they wrote the 14th Amendment. So when you read subject to the jurisdiction thereof, you should read it as if it meant incorporating the common law English definition, right? So if you take that language seriously, then Wong Kim Ark does not help President Trump, right? And I think I like to say that President Trump has two legal teams. There's the team that fucked up the Comey indictment, which is it's just like a fucking clown show. And then there's another team that's really, really careful and thoughtful. And this is the careful, thoughtful team. That team was saying, well, we don't need to overturn Wong Kim Ark. Overturning a case is a big deal. We're not going to ask you to do that. We're just going to ask you to read it narrowly. Just read what it actually held. What is the actual ruling? And this stuff about birthright citizenship, say that was a mistake. And they didn't, when they said all that stuff, they were wrong, but it doesn't matter because all of that stuff doesn't change the outcome of the case, and the outcome of the case should and is the same.
Right. Because if you try to overturn that actual case, you kind of might do more damage than you intend there in that aspect.
Well, and this is a inside baseball thing, but you got to get 5 votes out of 9 on the Supreme Court. And the swing votes here are going to be, Kavanaugh, Barrett, Roberts. These are going to be the justices that people are looking at. Overturning a 100-year-old plus case is a really big deal. And Justice Scalia was really loath to do it. Justice Barrett will be really loath to do it because she was Scalia's clerk. So he taught her how to be a judge, right? So she thinks the way he thinks. So it would be a big ask to overturn the case. And instead, this is a much more careful ask. And that's, I think, why they're going to be successful, because they didn't swing for the fences. They did something narrow and thoughtful, which is not how you normally describe the Trump administration, but that's what they did in this instance. And as a result, I think that when you're a lawyer and you're representing your clients, you're always like, do something thoughtful. Don't just say random things. And this administration can be a tough client sometimes, but this time they were pretty good.
That makes sense. I think that's actually a smarter tactic. You already know it's going to be argued. How are you going to dive into it in a way to scope in on the piece you want to scope in on? And it makes sense how you explain it in both directions, by the way, which that's how you know you got a good lawyer, if you can say both ways. Let me do a couple of super chats came in over on your side. Let me get those. And I do have quite a few people hanging out backstage. If you would like to join the open panel, now's a great time to go ahead and start hopping backstage. We're going to bring you up. I got some fun ones back there for you. Grassroots says, with a big 20, I am diametrically opposed to any policy that creates more Canadians.
I mean, Grassroots, this is thank you, buddy. Always appreciate you. Thank you so much for the 20. And you should be opposed to any such policy. And also, if taken to its logical extension, I've got to ask you, Grassroots, if we annexed Canada, does that make more or less Canadians?
Ooh.
Are we all Canadians at that point, or are we all? I'll let you ponder that, Grassroots. Get back to me.
I love that. And Grassroots also says, with another big 20, this is 100% what monarchists, neo-monarchists, or otherwise want. You are born as someone's property to be allocated or traded as is convenient. To monarchists, slavery is strictly a property rights issue. Shots fired.
Shots
Grassroots.
fired.
Damn.
And I think what he was referring to, and if he was going hard in the paint on me, then he can let me know. But I think what he was referring to is the British common law there, where it's like this idea that you're born subject to the crown and you can never leave and you can never become a citizen of another country and you owe them their labor forever. And that was one of the issues that changed my mind on this topic, because I knew about the British common law and I was like, well, God, how could we say that we didn't incorporate the British common law? Our whole legal system is based off the British common law. But, certainly there were aspects of the British common law that we rejected in the revolution. And if we rejected anything, wouldn't it be this? Because this is, I think Grassroots is right. This is birthright subjecthood is a monarchist position, if that's what it's for.
But we kind of still tapped into that common law to throw in the into how they were quoting it later.
Yeah. I don't think we rejected I don't think anyone would say we rejected the entirety of the common law, right? Because we in fact didn't. We used it. But I'm going to butcher the quote. James Madison wrote to the British philosopher Bentham at one point. It's just a private letter, so take it for whatever you want. But he basically said any aspect of the British common law that was contrary to the American Revolution didn't survive it, right? So like we had the British common law, but then we had a revolution from England, and what emerged was uniquely American in some ways, right? And I think that's the most sane way of looking at it. Like clearly, if we wanted to stay English, we could have. So there are some parts of England's traditions that we did reject, and this seems like a good candidate for rejection based off of what we were so angry about.
Right, because we don't really chime into the idea of we are subjects to like a king or a queen or a lord of any sort. We are individuals free to roam about the country and do what you will, just don't mess with anybody else, kind of thing.
Yeah, well, I mean, even if you to go back to the debate with Pisco and Nanfan, if you look at the language in the Declaration of Independence, we focus on natural rights in that debate, but it also says that we're going to have a government based on the consent of the governed, right?
Yes.
So like, how can you have that's a social compact, right? How can you have a government, a compact based on consent, if some people are allowed to join the compact against your will? Like you can say, you're illegal, you're not allowed to be here. We've passed a law, we don't want you here. And they're like, I snuck in and gave birth, so now my kid's a citizen. That doesn't strike me as being in line with our ideas of having a social compact based on consent. You don't you don't get to sneak your way into a social compact. You have to be allowed in by the people who have the compact. That's what that means.
Explain, because I've heard social compact. What is that if for dummy dumb me?
So the idea is that, like, in England, they had the divine right of kings.
Mm-hmm.
So why does the government get to have power over you? It's because the king is divine, and the king, you owe the king your allegiance. That's the source of government power. But in America, the source of government power is our consent. We all agree that this is how the government should be, that how the country should be. So it's a compact between the people. And that's where the source of the legitimacy and the source of the power is, not from some divine right. So if power comes from the agreement of people, it's the agreement of the specific people, right? So you can't just like sneak in and say like, well, me and my kid want to say X, Y, and Z about how you should govern your country. It's like, no, you're not. You're not part of the compact. We actually have to vote that you should be in.
And how is that different from like the social contract that people talk about all the time? Is there a difference?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I'm not exactly sure, to be totally candid with you. I think that when people talk about social contract theory, they're often, and I don't know if this is the right answer, so I'm speculating. They're often doing like moral philosophy, and they're talking about like how to come up with moral rules. Whereas social compact, I use that rather than contract because it includes people like children who can't consent, right? Like you're part of the team, but you couldn't sign a contract, right? So it's a little bit broader, and it also I like compact better because when I think of social contract, it implies that like each generation would get to like unilaterally opt out in a way that isn't quite accurate. Like you can opt out of America's social compact, but you kind of have to become 18 and then say you want to not be American anymore. And it's not something you can just easily do. The default is that you're in. And then not the default is that it's up to you.
Okay. All right. That makes sense. And 2 more super chats on your end. And then I'll bring up the panel, and I'm going to yell at Mater Nation. If you would like your Mater citizenship, you do have to pay your Mater taxes, ladies and gentlemen. See, the Mullalians over there are paying their taxes and dues, and Maters, you should as well. The Chipingro, is that Chipingro? Chap.
I go with Chipingro. I think it works.
Oh, I was like, about what am I missing here? I'm going to say the Chipingro. Okay. Comes in with a little 5, says a little grease for the champ. Defend the Republic, maintain the fence. And Sarah's great.
I appreciate the grease, and I appreciate the fence, and I appreciate Sarah. Thank you, Sarah. Yeah, I think we should rename it from Chesterton's fence to Chipingro's fence at this point, because that's his calling card.
Fair enough. And Grassroots says it makes more Americans, obviously. Americans are constitutionally incapable of becoming Canadian. We know how to... Oh, my God.
Well, I mean, there's a few great points here. First, it solved the foreign policy issue. We are very happy that that annexing Canada would create Americans. So good to solve that. Also, this is the most unique and particular prejudice I've ever heard. Like, I've never heard that Canadians don't know how to park. That's so specific. If you had said something like, Canadians just, have a strange love of the moose, that would be, but know how to park? I don't know. Thank you, Grassroots. Appreciate you, buddy.
And shout out to Jason, who now is telling me to officially shut up. So I'm going to shut up finally. Okay. Maters, you still owe your dues, and we will go ahead and kick off and bring your panel up, sir. Here we go. I will ever get rid of that intro. Everyone is always jamming out backstage. Everyone loves it in the chat. Shout out to the intro. All right. We have Obstacles, Jason, Average Birthright Enjoyer, Animated Effigy, who was talking shit in the chat. Clay, I'm a little impartial on which way you're going to go with this. I'd be interested. And we don't have Ben Balderson. No, we have Mrs. Balderson, Miss Christie. Here, it sounds like she's got a lot to say. All right, since there is a lady on panel, I'm going to actually, gentlemen, I'm going to hand it over to her first. If you want to bring up your thought, young lady.
Well, first of all, I just wanted to give you a huge compliment. I really appreciated your removing the emotion from the argument while still talking about people's very, very emotional topics. And I really appreciated that you were willing to provide both sides of that argument and not just a very, very biased emotional account. So thank you. And I really just wanted to ask some questions. I wasn't able to hear the whole interview because I was cooking dinner, but my emotional topic that I want to discuss rationally is long-term residents who have been established for generations or for decades long within the community, who have been building communities. I heard you bring it up, but I wasn't able to hear. I guess my questions about that are, how do you determine, how could that be set up in this decision where they are tackling those that are currently here? But I would imagine that that would be a one-time loophole where that only applies until that decision is made, because if you're here after, that loophole would have to be closed, or that's another incentive.
Yeah. So first of all, thank you for the kind words. I really appreciate that. And you're not bald at all, which is very confusing. So a few points. One, the executive order is forward looking. So anybody who had kids and their kids got birthright citizenship already, and if you've been here for 25 years, probably that already happened in most cases, they're unaffected. So that's step one. It has nothing to do with that. Then going forward, I do think what you've hit on is the hardest issue, right? If somebody's here for like 25 years and then they have a kid and they were here illegally, but they've been a good community member the whole time, do they get birthright citizenship? I think that's the point that Trump might lose on. I think that's the issue where I don't know what the court's going to do, but I suspect that they're going to focus on the temporary piece. I think what they'd be looking for is some kind of analog to the declarations of intent that I was talking about from like the 1800s, where it's like, if you're here for a long time, what are the indicia that you are trying to be American, that you're not trying to go back to your country? Like, for example, if you were here for 20 years, but you were sending money back to your home country constantly to support local political causes, like, and you were engaged in local politics back home, and you know, like that might be different than somebody who was like fully invested in this country. So I don't know what the court's going to do. That's a little bit too much reading the tea leaves for me, but I think that's exactly, you're totally right. That's the exact spot where Trump's order is most vulnerable and where he might lose, right? So I think you've hit the nail on the head.
Perfect. Okay. Did you have any other questions?
I did, and I totally lost it, so I'll pipe back in when I remember, and everyone else has had their turn.
Okay, Obstacles, you were first backstage, so I do want to hand it back over to you, sir. We all know first one up is the first one that gets to chat. So go ahead, Obstacles. I'll leave it to you.
Okay. Hey, much respects to Ryan, because I think when he was actually having this conversation, it was more from a judicial perspective versus political. Of course, we still have to address political. That's just reality, even when you're dealing with the judicial element. So I think he did a great balance at doing a balancing act of both to kind of just address the problem head on. And I appreciate one of the parts that he actually said, you asked him a question, Sarah, and he said, I don't know. I'm not quite sure. So I know he's really intelligent, because when someone can say, I don't know, you know they're intelligent to certain aspects of a conversation. And I think at the end of the day, when we're looking at all this, I wanted to talk about the aspect of like the security clearance, because I think, Sarah, you were kind of surprised. You're like, that's a long-term investment for somebody to be plotting and scheming that long. And as for me, I held a top secret security clearance for about 15 years in my life. And it is that serious in that realm, in that sector. One thing that you might not realize as an American citizen enjoying it is for somebody to get that type of mission from, let's say, Russia or China, that is a very honorable mission for them to go seek. And they will be willing to commit to it that long. I mean, come on, what else do I have to do? Is to fight inside China? If I have an opportunity to go to America and conduct this operation, there's a good portion of this society that definitely likes doing operations like that. So to you, it might seem like a long-term commitment, might seem like this is a sci-fi movie, but this is a real thing that, you know, we deal with on that side of the house, is just long-run operations. And the funny part about it is Elon Musk was recently sued for SpaceX because he wasn't hiring certain particular people with green cards. It's also funny, you have to be a citizen in order to have a top secret security clearance. So he was being sued by something that was basically a requirement of the government. You have to be a citizen in order to have a top secret security clearance. But at the same time, he was being sued for discriminating against people who didn't have that. And so you see that sometimes it can get a little bit irrational in the battlefield, but this is a real conversation, and I appreciate Ryan's balanced view on it.
No, I appreciate that, man. And I think that that's the thing. Like, you know, am I going to be able to point to evidence of clandestine spy operations? No, right? By definition, I will not be able to, because if I could,
not if they're good at it.
Yeah, they're not very good at it, and we'd be busting them up, right? But like, I think that when you think about stuff like that, it's a loophole, and when a loophole exists, people will take advantage of it, right? Like, just like if there's a loophole in the tax code, people will file their taxes in the way that lets them keep their money. When you have a loophole in the immigration system, people will take advantage of the loophole because you've created an incentive. And if you were had a security clearance, I don't have to tell you this, a lot of life is not about intentions, it's about incentives. You know, you create an incentive, somebody's going to take advantage of the incentive, and then yeah, can we police that? Can we find the spies? Can we arrest them? Sure. But then now we're incentivizing a mess and then trying to clean it up. And that's just kind of, you know, like, it's almost a certain point you're like, well, why are you doing that? Like, let's make this simpler and let's not incentivize the mess.
Perfect. Go ahead.
I'll give an example of something that I saw firsthand last year, Sarah. I went to what's called SHOT Show, which is one of the largest firearm, like, it's the future firearms that aren't being released yet and everything else. It's a huge gun show in Vegas usually. There were people from China walking around with like handheld 3D scanners, picking up the new firearms that we were designing over here and using this little handheld 3D scanner, and then like walking to the next booth and doing exactly that. And then you'll see the exact same gun like released in China like the next year.
Interesting. Tyler, I would like to kick it over to you, sir. I know you're ready to come have some fun. Go for it.
All right, so I'm not gonna hide this. I might have had a conversation or two with Ryan when he was prepping for this, so I may have known what he was going to be getting at with his arguments prior to the debate, and might have a little bit of inside knowledge here. So
it's all good, buddy.
I just want to be transparent about that. I'm not a genius. I kind of knew your inside strategy a little. So going off the original laws of the United States, at the time of 1868, when this amendment was passed, the immigration law that we had on a federal level was non-existent. Generally, the criteria was you walk into the country, there were no federal barriers, no borders, no infringement. You could walk in, and about 5 years of residency and basically just being of good moral character was all you needed to become a citizen. So one could argue the originalist intent of this amendment was to allow the immigration system that we had in the current day to continue. Now, we passed laws after that. Those laws might have set up some sort of barriers and whatnot, which is absolutely fine. But wouldn't one be reasonable to argue that applying modern day immigration to this amendment is actually living, breathing constitutional theory and not the originalist intent due to the laws that were in place at the time?
I think it's an argument people make. I disagree. And I think that you're misstating the history to be honest with you. There was not a national immigration law like we have today that made certain people illegal immigrants per se. Like I said with Sarah, that didn't really start until the Chinese Exclusion Acts later. But Keep in mind, the 14th Amendment was ratified in 1868. It was passed by the Congress in 1866, in June of 1866, to be precise. But in April of 1866, they passed the Civil Rights Act. And the Civil Rights Act said that you did not get birthright citizenship unless you were not subject to a foreign sovereign. So if you were subject to a foreign sovereign, if you had not signed your declaration of intent renouncing the foreign sovereign's hold over you, you did not get birthright citizenship according to the Act of 1866. Now, the same Congress, the 39th Congress, wrote the 14th Amendment 2 months later. So in terms of originalist evidence, are we supposed to suggest that these people completely changed their mind about what they meant in 2 months without telling anybody? And then here's the kicker. In 1870, reenacted the Civil Rights Act of 1866 without changing it. And it was good law for 70 years. So clearly, before they passed the 14th Amendment, they thought if you had foreign citizenship, you didn't get birthright citizenship. And after they thought that, they changed the language. But if you look at the debates and why they changed the language, and again, I said this before, I'm just going to be honest, American constitutional law is the history of American racism. The reason why they changed the language is pretty clear. They wanted to exclude the Indians.
Understandable, but first off, what do you mean by these people? Are you talking about the brown people coming in from the south of the border?
I'm talking about the 39th Congress of
Sure, we'll believe that. That being said,
when you don't have an argument, pull the race card.
That being said, there was the Page Act excluding Chinese.
I've never had somebody pull the race card while playing devil's advocate.
I mean, that's pretty weak to automatically put it that fast.
He's like, I'm a play devil's advocate. I think it's fun, and I'm gonna play the race card.
That being said, though, there were no immigration laws at the time specifically for people coming to the country. There were ones specifically on race. Those generally only applied to white people because they were racially excluding people from coming into the country. But at the end of the day, they wrote a separate act. So the separate act may line up with it. Now, what you're arguing is the Supreme Court should revoke this. What I'm arguing is the Supreme Court should allow both interpretations, the current interpretation that most people have been using since Wong Kim Ark and the Trump interpretation as well. You're saying we should have judicial overreach to go past what the court is being requested to review right now and actually overrule the law based on an originalist interpretation while only considering one side of the argument. Granted, I would say both are just fine. You could have both, and it's up to the executive to choose how they want to do their border policy, which is how we generally determine border policy broadly.
Then you agree with me. You just misstated the positions. I love you.
Well, the prompt. That's why I asked the prompt in DMs.
Because the current view is that the Constitution requires universal birthright citizenship. So if we can limit it as a matter of policy, that means that we are restricting the scope of the Constitution and expanding the scope of what democracy can decide. So in order to get to the point where the president or Congress has any flexibility in this area, Supreme Court has to limit the constitutional reach of birthright citizenship.
Very technical use of the prompt.
You have agreed with me, which I appreciate, Tyler, because you know I love being agreed with.
But very, very technical use of the prompt. Touche, sir. Touche.
Fair enough. I wanted to hand it over to Effigy because I know you were talking some smack in the chat, sir.
Hey, Sarah, you have something you might want to read in the chat, too.
Oh, I do have Crawl Rust. Thank you for the reminder.
I'm talking about Miss Balderson also.
10. Oh, yeah. We'll let Effigy bring up his, and then we'll hand it back over to you. Crawl Rust says, just because I love it. It's my favorite kind of dono. Please send more. Thank you. You earned your citizenship. Somebody's got some feedback going. Effigy, I'll hand it back to you, sir, if you wanted to jump in.
Sure. I haven't been able to watch your debate with Pisco, which I'm sure we're going to be retreading all over that ground in this. But
it's okay. I whooped his ass. Don't worry about it.
So I heard.
That's good.
My big question on this subject is where do we derive the idea that we have to look toward the citizenship or allegiance of a parent when the first sentence of the 14th Amendment clearly the only subject of that sentence is persons born?
Yeah, so it's the second part. It's the question. All the legal disputes are about the phrase "subject to the jurisdiction thereof,"
Which would still be toward the person's born, right?
Well, okay, so yeah, it's towards the person's born, and the question that is being asked is, are you subject to the jurisdiction, like territorial jurisdiction? You're subject to the jurisdiction at all, or are you subject to the complete jurisdiction? Now, I think, and I just to make sure I understand, I think the argument you're making is that the kids would not have a political allegiance when they're born. Is that what you're saying?
I mean, sure, yeah. I mean, a child born wouldn't have a political allegiance, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean,
to me, the implication of when you were talking about the difference between the Civil Rights Act and then the 14th Amendment, that seems to me that the difference is that the 14th Amendment is about the child exclusively.
Well, so is the Civil Rights Act. The Civil Rights Act was about people born and not subject to any foreign power. And in the 14th Amendment, it said born subject to the jurisdiction thereof. So but they both say born. The answer to the question is that in every jurisdiction in the world that does not have universal birthright citizenship, they all apply the same rule, which is that the political allegiance of a child who's not old enough to form their own allegiances is the political allegiance of their parents until they're old enough to form their own political allegiances, which is like really the only possible rule you could have. Like, the entire point of the 14th Amendment is for slaves, though, right? It's for former slaves. So how can you derive political allegiance if, say, like a slave is just like carried off of the boat from a country that they were kidnapped from, right? If the entire purpose of the 14th Amendment is to predominantly deal with the idea of slaves and former slaves and their citizenship and their kids' citizenship, how can we possibly exclude any circumstance that gives those people citizenship when they're the entire point of the amendment? Well, I think that if you think about like American slavery, what we did is we brought people over here and they were here for generations, right? So, if you ask like, okay,
that amendment would apply to a person who just got off the boat.
Yeah, though slavery was, of course, illegal at that time. It was illegal to import slaves at that time. But just to land the first point, if you're asking what is the political allegiance of newly freed slaves, the question is it to America or is it to a country they've never seen, right? Is it they've never been to? Could some prince in Africa draft them into their army or hold them to account for treason? It just doesn't make a lot of sense. So in the vast majority of cases, political allegiance is super obvious, but it seems like you're trying to hone in on what I think is the hardest example for my side, which is why it's a fun one. It seems like you're trying to get to the example of somebody who was imported here illegally in the first generation prior to the 14th Amendment. Is that what you were talking about?
Yeah. I'm obviously trying to find the hardest possible example for you, but to me, you have to, because the implication of the 14th Amendment is that it applies to all circumstances of all slaves. And I think that's like one of the strongest arguments you can make, regardless. So I could find this hypothetical slave who has an allegiance to a different country, who was already pregnant, who was brought over here, had the baby as soon as they got off, right when the 14th Amendment is passed, and it should still apply, even though it goes against some of your caveats.
Well, I mean, I think that like in that corner case hypothetical, I actually don't know that it has to apply. Like if you're saying that like if somebody was brought here illegally, they got off the boat on Tuesday. On Wednesday, the 14th Amendment was passed. On Thursday, they had a baby. And then they said, I hate it here. I don't want to be an American. I want to go back to my home country. Get me out of here. Right? Like, I think it would be fair to say, like, well, okay, let's send them home. Right?
Ryan, the easiest argument against what he's saying is slaves, didn't come over here willingly, but every single illegal does.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that is one of the. I was doing the.
You can use slavery for the basis of the argument because it's the literal entire point of the amendment.
Well, no, but to build on the point that I think it was Jason. I didn't quite catch you said.
Yes, sir.
The point that Jason made is an interesting one, and just to put it in the right frame of the argument, I was doing the constitutional argument. The other side of the argument is what does Trump's executive order actually ask for? And it says that people who are here illegally or temporarily, if you were human trafficked, to Jason's point, You didn't do anything illegal, right? The human trafficker did something illegal, not you. So this is not the historic argument. This is the modern application. But in the modern application of what President Trump is asking for, I don't know that his executive order would apply to somebody who was human trafficked. I think it applies to somebody who entered illegally, though I'm sure the court will decide that point. And I think, Jason, that's a point well taken.
Okay. Perfect. I do want to hand it back over to Christy. I had to mute you just for a second because Ben's over there making a bunch of noise. Tell Ben to sit down and shut up and listen. Christy, you thought of your question again. I want to hand it over to you if you wanted to chime in, and then I'll hand it back to the gentleman.
Yeah, my question is still sort of on the same topic, and I'm kind of getting a little bit off topic, but let's just say that they do decide that, I don't know, people that are here for a certain amount of time and have no criminal record and whatever, have a tie to the society, their communities, and they do get to stay. Somebody was talking about how it's different for people who are sending money home. And I wonder if that opens the loophole that people are sending, that do we then, if let's say we do let people in regardless of that, does that open the door that now they need to bring their families here because that's the only reason they're sending money home is their families are there and needing support. They're here for the opportunity to make money and send it home. It's not that they have an allegiance to that country necessarily, but they have an allegiance to their family.
Yeah, and I think this is a really good point. And I think that if the Supreme Court adopts a political allegiance theory of the 14th Amendment, we're going to have to start figuring out how to tell what someone's political allegiance is. But like, and this is just being like a
which is not a small thing, right? You're having to adopt an entire mechanism for every birth, right?
Well, it's not a small thing.
That is disputed.
It's not a small thing, but just to like be clear about how this works legally, the Supreme Court won't do it in this decision. What the they won't even try because the Supreme Court decides cases. They don't rule in the abstract. So what the Supreme Court's going to do is that if they do a political allegiance test, they'll say this is the political allegiance test, and then there'll be a wave of new cases that say, wait a minute, I did X, Y, and Z. Is that political allegiance? And the courts will start deciding these, and it will be messy. And after a few years, we'll have settled the law. And then we'll know what the rules are. But that's how the law develops, right? The Supreme Court articulates a test, and then we test it in court cases over the years, and it slowly solidifies. It doesn't, I don't want to create the impression it's going to snap into place and be perfect the next day. It won't. Like it will be a living, breathing thing that will evolve.
I mean, Ryan, correct me if I'm wrong. Isn't a majority of money sent back home to pay the smugglers who got them to the country in the first place?
This is the thing.
That's not what remittances do. That's just false. Because remittances happen all over the world too.
I think the answer is it really, really, really depends. You know, like in the example that Miss Balderson gave, where I know a lot of families who are here from the Philippines, and they oftentimes. Oftentimes the women are working and they're sending money back home to the husband and kids, right? With the goal of bringing the kids over later. That's very different than some of like I'm going back to Minnesota, like in the worst cases of the fraud allegations in Minnesota, the money was being sent and it was funding political projects in Somalia, right? So it's not even fun, and in some cases terrorism. So it's not even being used for their family, it's being used for stuff in another country. Like these are meaningfully different, I think, in terms of how the law might look at you. I don't know what the law is going to be, but I think that those distinctions are the type of things that might matter.
Ryan, as a lawyer, can you think of any other executive order that has changed the interpretation of a constitutional amendment?
The executive orders? I mean, let me think.
An executive order that has changed the interpretation of a constitutional amendment. Has that ever happened before? I'm genuinely asking. I can't.
I don't know. I don't know off the top of my head. I wouldn't be surprised if it did, because
I would be completely surprised if it did.
No,
because it's a constitutional amendment.
Ron, you upset Effigy, so he's trying to get a gotcha. That's all this is.
Yeah. No, don't.
Just have one question about that.
The reason.
Hold on.
Sorry, go ahead, Swatch. Sorry.
The reason I would be unsurprised is that when our understanding of the Constitution changes, it's typically because the Supreme Court makes a ruling. And how does stuff get to the Supreme Court? Either the executive did something, Congress did something or a state did something, right? So somebody had to do something, and that creates a court case. Supreme Court doesn't change it on its own. So anytime the Supreme Court changes the law, some aspect of the government had to take a position that was contrary to the prevailing view of the Constitution.
Right.
So I don't have an example locked and loaded, but I would be stunned if this was the first one, because how else do you get court cases if the government's not doing something that is, the Supreme Court needs to review?
Madison versus Marbury.
Yeah. Well, that's when we decided we get to do it. Oh, actually, you know what? Holy shit! I think you're right. Holy shit! That's the most obvious one, and I missed it. He's 100% right. In
Probably
Marbury,
the good valid one though.
In Marbury v. Madison, the executive did something unconstitutional, and the Supreme Court reviewed it, and that's why we have Supreme Court review today, and that changed the meaning of Article 3 of the Constitution. So yeah, the most famous case in all of law somehow escaped my recollection. That's a good catch. It's literally the most famous case that exists, and it didn't occur to me.
I'm pretty sure you have plenty of case law that you can forget.
Chapingro, stand by. Chapingro comes with a big 5 just to give me the compliment. I like that they're paying you to give me a compliment. That's my favorite kind. Sarah has some of the best production quality in YouTube politics, I'm guessing. Much love to you. Thank you so kindly. And Ryan, if you wanted to respond, it's on your side.
mean, you're obviously right. Like every time I watch your graphics, I'm like, I've got the one good graphic that Bud Gaff made for me. Thank you, Bud, if you're listening. But like, I got to up my media game. Like I got no thumbnail game. I've got no transition game. Like this is stuff I got to work on. I got to get some people who can do some tech for me, because I'm a Luddite and I can't put this shit together myself.
Oh my God. I would even say like editing videos are probably my favorite part of this. If I could just edit videos all day and not do this part, I'd be a happy camper. All right.
Can I tell you just give you a sense of how bad this is? In law, lawyers are famous for being shitty at tech. Like I often have had situations where I'm working with another lawyer and they're like, don't send me an Excel. I don't work in Excel. Send me like Word only, so like we like to print things. We like to have printed documents that we read. So yeah, I think I'm going to have to find people better at this than me and pay them, because the idea that I'm learning this shit's not going to happen.
You heard it here first. Mr. Ryan Mullally is looking for some tech nerds and video people, and probably someone to just run all of that.
I can help a little bit. I can help on the YouTube edit. Ryan, I'd recommend if you don't like downloading like Canva or something, or the other. What's the other one? Clipchamp is the other one that you can use there. The YouTube mobile suite to post shorts has editing tools built in, and so you can learn a lot from producing a video using YouTube.
Awesome, man.
Just use Adobe Premiere. Pay for it. $25-$30.
I'm just saying, if you guys have
Ryan don't want that. Ryan just wants to pay you.
He's not going to.
If you guys have suggestions, hit me up, and if you guys want money, hit me up. Right?
Like he's a busy man. He wants to pay somebody else to do it.
Talking about paying me to do some stuff, if you've got interest. I'll give it
Microsoft Paint.
Sasquatch, I know you were sitting here for a little bit. You had your hand up, so I wanted to hand it over to you.
Is there any reason why we can't document these children, issue them a passport, and send them home with their parents where they can return when they reach adulthood, or can find some way of staying in the U.S.?
Like, you mean under the current rule?
Right.
Yeah, under the current rule, that's kind of what happens. They don't get the passport because they're too young. What happens is they leave, and then they have they have a birth certificate, and then later, if they want a passport, if they want citizenship, they can get it. Right.
Right. But what's wrong with that? Why is that wrong?
Well, a few things. Morally, like if you think about like social compact theory and what it means to be a citizen, it just makes a mockery of the whole process, because they're exploiting a loophole in the system to get citizenship for people that we are trying to exclude from citizenship. So like morally, it creates a bit of a problem. Then, in terms of the actual hazards, Sarah and I walked through some of them, the idea that there are going to be, room for espionage, room for infiltrating local politics.
That happens already. sir.
Well-
that is already a mechanism
Right.
that we have in place to protect our government. I don't
we don't
see
have to.
why.
We don't have to.
I'm sure
make
there
it-
are never citizen spies, right?
we don't have to make. We don't have to make it easier, right?
Let's
like
watch-
the question is.
here's-
The
Hold
question
on, let him
is it
finish.
perfect? The
Let him
question
answer.
is, are we incentivizing it? It's kind of like when you talk about like how do we secure our border? Well, like one way you secure the border is by making the border tighter. Another way you secure the border is by disincentivizing people from crossing it illegally. Like one of the things that's made Trump's border policies successful, whether you like them or not, is that it used to be that if you crossed the border and you were caught, nothing really happened to you. Now, if you cross the border and you're caught, the consequences are more severe. So less people are trying because the incentives changed. Birthright citizenship is the mother of all incentives, right? It lets you skip the entire process. So, even if it on that level alone, it creates a real incentive for illegal immigration. And the easiest way to clean up illegal immigration is to change the incentives.
What do you mean by incentives? What do you mean? Can you, sorry,
The desire for their children to be an
incentives?
American citizen and take advantage of the country.
I was asking,
of their birth,
respectfully, I was
not
asking,
actually
I
have
was
the
asking
steps
Ryan.
to
Hold on,
respectfully.
hold on.
But
I was asking Ryan.
So like,
Duck, I was
Thank you. I'm
Hold
sorry.
on. Stop. Duck was asking Ryan. Ryan, if
Yeah.
you can
So if you take a really like easy example, like there's a lot of women who are pregnant and shouldn't be traveling because it's
Women aren't incentives. So. Sorry.
Hold on,
let me answer the question.
Women
Doug.
aren't incentives. Okay.
Women are not the incentives; they're the people who are incentivized.
Okay,
So
we
you
agree.
have to ask yourself,
What?
why would they risk a dangerous border crossing, and potentially their pregnancy, to do something illegal, maybe run in with security guards, maybe get arrested? Why are they doing this? Well, they're doing this because if they have a child in the United States, their kid is a citizen, which gives their kids all kinds of benefits they would not already get. And there's the anchor baby phenomenon where
So
if
you
the
don't
mother
know.
if the mother
So you
has the
don't know
child
is
of a
what you're
citizen,
saying.
Hold on, Doc. He's answering.
then it's easier for the mother to stay in the country even though she crossed the border illegally. So there's an incentive for the mother to cross the border illegally because giving birth here benefits her and benefits her kid. Now, if you take away birthright citizenship, she doesn't have a reason to do that. So you'll have less of that behavior. That's the incentive.
Ryan, perfect example that I can give. The Reagan amnesty program. I mean, all it did was the people that he gave amnesty to started voting for more rights for, to bring their families back to our country.
Yeah, I mean, when you create an incentive, it changes people's behavior. That's just what incentives do. You know what I mean? Like in our system right now, like look at our taxes. You pay lower taxes on your investments than you do on your income. Why do we have it like that? It's because we want to incentivize people to invest in companies instead of hoarding money under their mattresses. So we create an incentive for them. If you create an incentive for people to cross the border illegally, you're going to have more people crossing the border illegally. It's not rocket science.
And I would also add to it, and I think you did a
Sorry.
good job, Ryan, but I'm just saying it's an option. It's an immigration option. It's a naturalization option. It's an immigration strategy. Reason I say that is if I wanted to do the same thing, if I wanted to come to Thailand and become a citizen and be able to get my kid to be a citizen to this country, that would not be an option because the immigration just doesn't establish that. The only way is to immigrate legally into Thailand, stay respectfully and have no incidents occurred. And then in 10 years, I can file via the immigration protocol and naturalize as a person who wasn't born here from a lineage of being Thai. So you see what I'm saying? So you might be against incentivization as the word, but it's really just the actual immigration option. Like, if that's not there, then nobody would just do it because it's not there and they couldn't do it.
And this is
just get deported.
This is the perfect example you just gave, because that's exactly why countries like England that used to have birthright citizenship stopped having birthright citizenship because it created these problems. And you eloquently put it, there's other ways to do it that are options that just work better. So if, look, if the Constitution requires us to do something dumb, then it requires us to do something dumb. And that's the legal question. But if you have the option, why not do something smart?
And Joshua Stacy, if you would like to read your own super chat, sir, the floor is yours.
All right. That's a question for you, Ryan. What did you have for lunch today? Yes or no?
my friends had some run-ins with our mutual friend Pisco, and in celebration of that, I don't know, Sarah, if you can bring up my my share screen. Yep. So during the debate, I didn't get to use slides at Word War Debate, but if I was allowed to use slides, this is one of the slides that I had prepared. Because Pisco loves asking yes or no questions so much that I thought he might get stuck in the yes or no loop, and it would be helpful to have a visual to explain to the audience what was happening.
That's amazing.
But I've learned some tools with this guy, man.
That is Pisco. And
I didn't realize he argued for advocacy. I argue for exploration. They're incompatible. When I started facing off more, things changed a bit. There was a noticeable shift, we could say. But anyway, yeah, I just argued like an angry judge. That's the tone I like to use with him now.
Pisco is notorious for the yes or no questions and the hyperfixation on a little tiny point, which, by the way, to be fair, this is just debate meta, so this isn't really the topic, but I had the affirmative position, right? And he had the negative position. So if he can make the conversation doom spiral into incomprehensible gibberish on a yes-no question where we never get anywhere, he wins by default. So it's actually a decent tactic if you have the negative, is just to like make the conversation impossible. And if you have the affirmative, you have to stop people from doing that. So that's just that's more of a debate tactic thing than anything else. But if you're you have to look who has what position. If Pisco has the positive, he can't really do that. So it does help if you're in a venue and with a crowd that gives a shit about the debate prompt. Let's be honest about these online debates. Not always hyper technical.
They were talking to me at now they fucked you over on the audio like real bad. That can't be rubbed in their face hard enough. But the other thing is,
it's fixed on my channel. It's fixed on mine. It's fixed.
That's fine. I watched in real time. But they were responding on X to me. They were like, "Oh, would you like to come on?" So we'll see. And we'll talk about family law. Let's fucking go.
Yeah, man. I would do it if they want to do it. Look, it's a brand new thing. I think we can be honest that they're working out the kinks, and there were some, like, the audio was fucked. There's some kinks to work out, but I think they do a cool thing where, they had like Anna and Pearl.
Are you talking about World War Debate?
World War Debate, yeah. But I think it's cool that they had like Anna v. Pearl, where they've got millions of followers, and then I've got like 600 YouTube subs. So they're like willing to have like the big debate, and then they're willing to have like the showcase for people that don't have a big viewership. And I think that's a really cool thing. And I think it's worth supporting them for that alone, because it's if you got a small channel, it's hard out here. I think the platforms that want to showcase smaller.
Are they a for-profit organization, Ryan? They're for-profit.
I'm sure they are. I don't know.
I understand.
Grassroots comes in with a big 20 and says, "This is Ryan's best pragmatic point. Why would you incentivize a behavior that you already decided was illegal? This is the base of libertarian philosophy from Hop and Forward."
I mean, it's a great point. I'm glad that he appreciates that I made it. So thank you, Grassroots. And thank you for the grease tonight, buddy. You're really going after it. But I mean, this is the paradigmatic situation where like we have already said this is illegal. We've already said this is a problem. And this is why I think Pisco he only made legal arguments when we debated. He didn't make the moral argument, because I think the moral argument's actually pretty clear. Like the ship sailed. This is why England doesn't have birthright citizenship anymore. It actually is a problem. It's really, really all of the work is on the legal side. Because on the practical side, like how could we possibly? We're just making our own life harder. We've said this is illegal. Let's fix the problem.
I have a question in regards to that. So, in reference to your moral argument, I've heard you say it. I'm trying to find the accuracy in what's moral about it. But you stated that England or some of these other countries don't have the birthright citizenship. How is that a moral argument?
Well, the argument is that birthright citizenship, whatever people thought of it back in the day, right? And I would say that the reason people had it in England back in the day was to create a labor force that could never leave for the king. So that maybe that's not a good thing to want to do. But whatever benefits birthright citizenship had no longer apply in a modern world where travel is this easy, right? Because this doctrine originated in a time period when like getting to another country would take you months or years. So nobody was there temporarily, right? But in the modern era, this problem of people here temporarily has reared its ugly head. And as a result, all the countries that had birthright citizenship changed their mind. And why did they change their mind? Because it was bad policy.
So you've gone around in circles. Each one of your answers, and you've given quite a few of them, have all resulted in because we don't do that anymore, or because they don't do that anymore. That is the moral framework of your argument. It is because we don't do that anymore, because we don't need it anymore. I want to know what the morality, why is it bad?
You want to do moral philosophy?
Well, you're saying that we need a moral reason.
Yeah. I was doing colloquial moral, not like deep cut moral philosophy moral. If you're going to do deep cut moral philosophy moral, then the arguments would depend on the framework you adopt. If you watch the argument with me and Pisco, I'm a natural law theorist, so I believe America is a propositional nation. The problem with universal birthright citizenship morally is that you give citizenship to people who do not believe in the proposition. And a propositional nation cannot survive if its citizens don't believe in the proposition. And that's the social compact issue, right? Where in order to decide what is moral within the country, we decided that we were going to have a philosophy, and then the people is a compact deciding. Now, if you let people who believe different things into the compact, they're going to change the compact. And if they're doing it without your consent, that's immoral, because the morality in the system is derived from the people who decide together, right?
Want to jump in here real quick?
Well, I had a follow-up.
Oh, you're all right.
Yeah, let Clay go. Clay's cooking right now.
Shut up, Ryan. Shut the fuck. Not you, Mullally. This piece of shit right here. Shut the fuck up.
So the morality is being determined for what birthright is. That means babies. So now we're determining the morality of someone that, quite frankly, is a baby. So how do you do that? How do you determine what a baby's morality is?
You're not determining their morality. You're determining their parents' morality.
Okay, now we're getting somewhere.
Yeah.
So are we going to now at this point charge the babies with what the parents do?
No, I think the question we're asking is, to give one of the hypotheticals. Let's say a Chinese woman comes here. She gives birth here because she is in one of those programs where you can pay to do it. She takes the kid back. She raises them with the values of the Communist Party, long live Mao, Red Book, all that stuff, right? Now they get to come back to America and vote for communism, right? The moral hazard is that you have invited somebody into your social compact who does not share your moral system.
So freedom is the moral system. The freedom to vote. And have representation that represents your views.
Freedom for who?
Some people believe in communism.
Freedom for who?
Now, it doesn't turn out well for them, but the moral framework is freedom to choose.
Freedom for who?
It's freedom for all people to choose.
It's certainly not the freedom for people in the upper class to decide who gets to be citizens and who doesn't, right?
Well, no. Because the question is, yes, in the American moral framework, we value liberty, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, right? Like that's one of our core values, but it's liberty for citizens. And the question we're asking is, who gets to be a citizen? Right? So the question is, do you get to be a citizen if your parents had no allegiance to the country, don't share the values, gamed the system, and as a result want to confer a benefit upon their child who, if allowed to vote in our system, will vote to destroy it? That seems to me like a moral hazard.
Hold on, let me ask you a question, Clay. Can I ask you a question, Clay? When that mother, let's just say mother, she's on this tourist thing, she comes over has a baby here, and then 2 weeks later goes back home to her own country, why does that baby automatically get citizenship in her own country where she's from?
I actually understand what you're saying. I don't believe it actually happens.
No,
that way
I want you to
often.
answer the question. Why does that baby get citizenship of the country that the mother's from?
Currently, right now, it's just a legal framework.
No.
It happens in China, Clay.
Hold on,
That's the why. That's the
stop
why.
For a second. Stop and listen. Baby is born in America. Mother is from, let's say, China. Okay. Mother takes baby back to China. Now, would they consider that baby to be Chinese?
Who's they?
The China. Would
The
they
Chinese
consider
government.
I don't know.
Chinese-
I don't study Chinese law.
Well, the answer is yes,
they would,
Clay.
Sarah.
The answer is
Yes, they would.
Okay, so
We-
fair enough.
we-
I'll
Okay,
take
but
I'll
here's
take your.
here's the
hold on,
important
hold on.
part, though.
I'll take your word
Here's
for it.
Here's the
I'm trying to
important part for
understand
it.
what
Or
you're
Google it.
asking me here, though.
Yeah, just follow me for a second, Clay. Why does the Chinese government consider that baby to be Chinese, even though it was born on American soil?
I have no idea. I don't study Chinese law.
Take an educated guess.
I have no idea. I'm not going to take
Anybody else
an
wanna
educated guess because
take
it's
an
not an
educated
educated guess coming from somebody who's sitting here telling you I don't know. Is it
I'll
fair to
take-
say I don't
I'll
know,
take
or must
I'll
I
take-
answer?
Because
the parents
it
are trying to
benefits
lose
it
10,000.
benefits them to
Ryan,
have a
hold
dual.
on, stop.
Yeah.
Ryan,
I'll-
could you say that loud and proud one more time, please?
I'll take because the parents are Chinese for 10,000.
Thank you. So
Okay.
if the parents,
But we don't
so
do it like they do
Yeah,
it in China.
China's-
follow me, Clay.
This is
Shut your
America.
mouth for
We
a
do it
minute.
like we do it in
Clay,
America.
you're
You want to be
frustrating
more
the
like
shit out
China
of
now?
me. You're not
Communist?
listening. You're not listening, Clay. The point is,
No,
in
I'm trying to understand what you're asking.
You're not understanding because you're not fucking. Stop talking. Stop talking.
Go ahead.
That's why you can't understand. Listen to
Ask
me,
a
Clay.
question.
So if China says baby's born in America, but mom and dad are Chinese and they come back home because they just stopped into America for a couple weeks, come back home, we're automatically going to presume that child is Chinese because mom and dad are Chinese. Okay. Right. So if
i.e., part of an ethno state.
hold on, but
Communist.
shout out, I've got the one and only Angry Man backstage. I would love to get him up here and yell. If somebody could support and sponsor to get him up here, I would greatly appreciate it. He's about to come fuck shit up for you, Clay. But listen, if China recognizes that baby is Chinese because the parents are Chinese, why are we recognizing that baby as American if they're recognizing
Because
it?
that's our legal
doesn't make any
framework.
You
just asked the same
You're
question.
asking for the moral component behind it. That's,
No, you didn't. You
doesn't
asked why.
fucking sense.
You didn't say.
Clay, you're
didn't
being
say,
obtuse.
Does he deserve it? You don't say why does he deserve it?
And Sarah, bring up
You're
Angry Man
asking
for
me
effigy.
why.
For effigy. Okay, effigy, you're not getting any love this week. What is going
That's
I
a
have
good
the
trade. That's a real
I have
good
the
trade.
answer to that question if you'd like.
What
So-
up, baby?
Please. Go ahead.
Oh my God! I'm so jealous of that smoke. Oh my God! You've no idea.
Well, you don't want.
It like pains me even to look at that. Oh, the end.
That looks like a nice cigar. It really does.
You might be jealous of that smoke, but you're not going to like this smoke, sir. So, looking into the Expatriation Act of 1868, which you brought up, to quote it, the right of expatriation is natural and inherent right of all people, indispensable to the enjoyment of the right of life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. So, if you are believing in the moral principle of the United States laid down by Thomas Jefferson in the Declaration of Independence, you agree that the right of expatriation is a natural right. And because of this law, there was nothing that they needed to sign. I would argue that forcing them to sign some sort of documentation and not just state their expatriation is an infringement of their natural rights, Ryan.
Well,
are you a communist?
Well, first of all, it's a great law. It's a great law. It was a really good idea. When was it signed?
This is the law you brought up to me that was
when was it signed?
17 days after.
When was it signed?
17
Date, counselor. Date.
1868, right?
Yeah, it was July 27th, 1868.
The example I brought up about the Declaration of Intent was from 1863. So the answer to your question is that law didn't exist at the time my example happened. So
I'm arguing morally.
Nobody took
morally.
the law into account.
Oh, you just got bent over a table for moving the football.
Good thing we don't rule on law off morals.
One at a time. I can't hear anybody.
We shifted the conversation to morality, which is why
I love moral arguments, but if you go to court and make one, you're going to get laughed out the door.
What
right?
I wanted.
I'm making this argument to you because we shifted the conversation to morals. The right to expatriate is an inherent right to all people, indispensable to the enjoyment of the right of life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness.
Courts don't rule off of morals.
It's an inherent moral right, and that is in particular why it was morally correct to reject the English common law that had no right of expatriation. The question, though, is what legal rights do people have when you're talking about their ability to expatriate? Morally, I agree with you. We should have had an expatriation law earlier, but we didn't.
But that goes back to my original argument, which does argue legality. When this amendment was passed, there was no form of federal immigration law. So you're trying to take new law and apply it retroactively to old ruling. This is living constitutionalism and not originalism based off of a moral principle.
I'm not sure what I'm not even sure what argument you're making, because it seems that you're time traveling all over the place.
I don't think it's me that's doing that.
The 14th Amendment and the Civil Rights Act, which is what we were discussing, were drafted in 1866. The Expatriation Act was later in time.
Mm-hmm.
So, they might have been thinking about those things, and I would actually say those things actually are useful in terms of understanding, what people in the era were thinking about. But if you're saying that the Expatriation Act came before those laws, and
17 days after the ratification. Now, when something's drafted, it goes through a long process of being argued and things change and amendments are proposed. So the final version of the 14th Amendment was right when this was passed.
How is the Expatriation Act even in tension with my theory of the Constitution?
Well, it's saying that you have the natural right
to expatriate.
Yes. So any form of documentation necessary to be signed would be an infringement on that right. If you're saying you don't have the right to expatriate because you didn't sign this piece of paper, that piece of paper is against our moral principle, which goes back to my original point. When this amendment was passed, there was no form of law. So the original intent of the amendment was to allow people to expatriate at will.
There was a form of law before that, though. Ryan explained it to you earlier.
Oh, the expatriation is very different than birthright citizenship. It relates only to the extent it informs whether or not we incorporated English common law, which did not have a right of expatriation. Expatriation doesn't really affect birthright citizenship in any meaningful way, unless you're getting to the point where you're asking who has sufficient political allegiance. But if you're at that point, I've already won, because that's the theory of the Constitution I'm arguing for. Under the universal birthright citizenship theory, none of this matters because you decide the question based on English common law way earlier.
This law talks about perpetual perpetual allegiance is what this law talks about, that you have perpetual allegiance to the nation of origin.
Which is the English common law.
What this does is reject that. All you have to do is say, I am no longer aligned with this country. Even if I didn't come in legally, I am no longer aligned with the previous country, and now I am subject fully to your jurisdiction.
See, Tyler, I think that you're because I know you're playing devil's advocate. I think you're confusing your talking points. You're actually on my side. I
am at the end of it.
Because if you look at Wong Kim Ark, the case we're talking about, the universal birthright citizenship people, the Pisco people, say that Wong Kim Ark said that we incorporated English common law, which has no right to expatriation. The fact that we say, actually, we want a right to expatriation is good evidence that we hated the English common law, and Wong Kim Ark was wrong, because we definitely did not want to include the British doctrine of perpetual subjecthood, because, as you said, these same men wanted expatriation. It's an argument against the expansive reading of Wong Kim Ark, not an argument against my side.
That's all I got. Sarah, you look fantastic tonight. Praise ICE, and even more, praise Israel. See you guys later.
Wow, that's one to drop out on. All right,
that's gonna upset some liberals.
Should make that a short.
I'm sorry, it was Duck. Duck was.
I was fucking beating the bushes. They're gonna pop up now.
As a matter of fact, I want to inform you all that the gauntlet is officially open. We are going to start maneuvering over that way. If you are watching over on the Raging If you're watching over on the Raging, you guys on Generator now. If you are watching over on the Raging Tomato side on YouTube, I will redirect you here in about 2 minutes and raid over to the Gauntlet. If you already know where you're going, please feel free to do so. If you want to join in on this, it's the Gauntlet debate at YouTube. That's where we're going, just to continue the show over there because you guys get crazy after the 2-hour mark. Anyways, Grassroots with some more grease says with a big 50. You don't have to do that at all. A baby has 2 allies by birth, 1 to each parent, and all of the systems and things that help them when they are helpless. Help them when they are helpless. Even a baby appreciates being born American before they know what America is. Ryan, you are welcome to respond.
Well, I mean, for 50, I obviously agree. Thank you, Grassroots. I appreciate the grease tonight. Thank you, buddy. And yeah, I mean, this is, I think some of the confusion on this topic, I almost think has to be intentional, where it's like, what is a baby's political allegiance? It's like, it's
they don't have one.
It's the political allegiance of its parents. Like, there's nothing else it could be, right? And then later, when they're old enough, they can form their own. But like, for those of us who have children, it's not exactly top on their list of things they're thinking about when they're born. So, it turns out that it's going to follow the parents because there's just no alternative.
And Sarah, can I ask a quick question? Duck, do you promise by boot you're moving to Italy?
Oh yeah, that's what I said at the beginning of the show. I remember that. Yeah, I would move to Lake Como. I think is like a very beautiful area of Italy.
That's not Italy, Duck, but thank you. Okay.
I will gladly accept any money for booting Duck just to see if he actually goes to Italy, non-Italy.
How much
Did
would it
anybody
cost to
else?
send them to Italy?
I don't know. Did anybody else
interrupting
have
Sarah, guys. Sarah's talking.
Did anyone else have a response to Grassroots on this? Yes, go ahead, Clay.
Yes. So I this is kind of what I was getting to even more so. Now I understand that there's the possibility that babies who are born here, they go back, they're going to owe allegiance probably to whatever country they go back to. But let's be real. Someone who experiences America, like even children, like of course not babies. Babies really don't develop until like 5. Their cognitive abilities don't have really good memory. But their allegiance, right, is going to be to their nation, just as any immigrant most likely would have allegiance to any nation. No, this is absolutely true. They 100% all have allegiance to their own nations. Their families are there.
Clay, here's how easy this is.
Don't freak out.
Let him finish. Let him finish, and then I'm gonna take over for a minute.
Yeah. So the reality is, anybody who comes here really does realize that this is the greatest country on earth, and there's very good reasons for that. The liberty here, the freedom here to basically live your life mostly is prevalent compared to any other nation. So when people tell me I'm worried about the babies coming back when they're 18 and trying to be a communist, I just don't believe it, man. I don't.
We don't care. It's the truth.
I have a quick question. If this is the greatest country on earth, why the hell are there so many leftist liberals trying to change it?
Because they hate us.
Or
they hate us.
For the people who have kids on panel, let me ask you a quick question.
I got a bone to pick. I got a bone to pick with you.
Would you say that to one person?
Everyone stop for just a second. I need to take care of some. Shut up.
I got a bone to pick with you.
Hold on, Angry Man. I will let you pick all the bones you want, but I do need to take over for just a minute. If you're watching over on the Raging Tomato side, Jason, I'm going to give you full throttle on booting Duck for the evening because that's the third time he's done that.
He keeps
Every
doing
time
it.
I come on this panel, Duck has a hair up his ass about it. Like, bro, I'm sorry I said something that hurt your pussy.
I was just saying you're a liar this time.
All right. That wasn't an invitation. Hold
on.
on. Let me take care of these logistics. This is important. I have to get through this.
Sir,
all right,
enjoy
Duck,
your
shut
cigar.
up. I'm going to mute you. All right, listen. We are moving over to the Gauntlet now. I am shutting down the Raging Tomato side. Either catch the raid or